My fiancée lied about being pregnant to trap me, to keep me from leaving. I thought I was going to be a father. That was the only reason I stayed. When I confronted her, she cried, "It's crazy, how I stayed for a child that never existed, and now she acts like I'm the villain," and then blamed me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments if you've ever been lied to like this. I really want to hear your thoughts. It was 2 a.m. when I found myself standing in our bathroom, holding a pregnancy test that would change everything I thought I knew about my life. The test was negative, and it was hers. Let me back up for a second. 3 months earlier, my fiancée Sarah had tearfully told me she was pregnant. 3 months of planning our wedding, buying baby clothes, and me pretending to be excited about becoming a father. 3 months of my life built on what I was now realizing was a complete lie. My hands were shaking as I stared at that single pink line, or rather, the absence of a second one. I'd found the test box hidden under some towels in our linen closet while looking for toilet paper. Something had made me open it, maybe the same instinct that had been nagging at me for weeks. The bathroom felt like it was spinning around me. I sat down on the edge of our bathtub, still clutching the evidence of Sarah's deception. How do you process something like this? How do you realize that the woman you're supposed to marry, the woman carrying what you thought was your child, has been lying to your face for 3 solid months? I thought about all the conversations we'd had about baby names, the crib we'd picked out together, the way she'd rubbed her still flat belly and talked about feeling flutters, the morning sickness that conveniently only happened when I was around to witness it. It had all been an act. But why? Why would someone fake a pregnancy? And then it hit me like a freight train. I remembered the conversation we'd been having the night before she told me she was pregnant. I'd been working up the courage to end our relationship. I'd been planning to tell her it wasn't working out. And somehow, she'd known. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made me freeze. Sarah was awake. I quickly shoved the test and the box back under the towels, my heart pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it through the door. "Baby, what are you doing up?" Her voice was sleepy, innocent, the same voice that had been lying to me for months. "Just couldn't sleep," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady. "Going back to bed now." As I walked past her in the hallway, she reached out and touched my arm. "Everything okay? You look pale." I looked into her eyes, the same eyes that had filled with tears when she'd told me about our baby. And for the first time, I saw her clearly. I was engaged to a complete stranger. Looking back, the red flags were there from the very beginning. But when you're caught up in what feels like a fairy tale romance, it's easy to ignore the warning signs that might save your life. I met Sarah at the marketing firm where we both worked. She was new to the company, fresh out of college, and had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room when she talked to you. I was 28, she was 24, and I was completely swept off my feet by her attention. The first month was incredible. She was funny, spontaneous, and seemed genuinely interested in everything about me. She wanted to know about my childhood, my dreams, my fears. She remembered every little detail I shared with her. Looking back, I realized she was building a profile, learning exactly what buttons to push. But at the time, I felt like I'd won the lottery. Sarah had this way of making herself indispensable. When I mentioned I hated grocery shopping, she started doing it for me. When I complained about my messy apartment, she began coming over to help clean, eventually just taking over entirely. It felt like love. It felt like someone finally cared enough to take care of me. The isolation happened gradually. It started with little comments about my friends. "Did you notice how Jake never asks about you when he calls? He just wants someone to listen to his problems." Or, "I don't think Michelle really likes me. She always seems uncomfortable when we hang out." At first, I defended them. But Sarah was persistent, and she was smart about it. She never demanded I stop seeing anyone. Instead, she made spending time with her so much more appealing than dealing with the drama my friends apparently brought to my life. My family got the same treatment. "Your mom seems stressed every time we visit. Maybe we should give her some space." "Your brother looked really tired last time we saw him. He probably doesn't want us adding to his workload by visiting." Within 6 months, Sarah had become my entire social world, and I'd let it happen because it felt like devotion, not manipulation. The control escalated slowly. She had opinions about my clothes, my haircut, how I spent my free time. She wanted to know where I was every moment of the day, not because she was possessive, but because she worried about me. She tracked my location on my phone for safety reasons. By our first anniversary, I was living in a bubble with Sarah at the center. My friends rarely called anymore because I was always busy with her. My family had stopped inviting us to things because we'd declined so many times. I hadn't even noticed it happening. But 18 months in, something started to shift. Maybe it was the constant walking on eggshells or the way every conversation seemed to revolve around what Sarah needed or wanted. Maybe it was the realization that I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed until my stomach hurt, or felt genuinely excited about anything. I started to feel trapped in my own life. That's when I began planning my escape. The night I was going to end things with Sarah, I had it all planned out. I'd practiced the conversation in my head dozens of times. I was going to be gentle but firm, explain that we wanted different things, that we'd grown apart. I'd even prepared for the tears, the pleading, the promises to change. What I wasn't prepared for was what actually happened. "I have something to tell you," Sarah said the moment I walked through the door. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she was sitting on our couch holding something behind her back. I don't know how to say this. My first thought was that she was about to break up with me. Maybe she'd sensed what I was planning. Part of me felt relieved. If she ended things first, I wouldn't have to be the bad guy. "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. She pulled her hand from behind her back, revealing a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines. Her lower lip was trembling, and tears were streaming down her face. "I know this isn't what we planned," she whispered. "I know it's scary, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." The speech I'd rehearsed evaporated from my mind. All my carefully planned words about incompatibility and growing apart seemed petty and selfish in the face of this news. She was carrying my child. How could I abandon her now? "Are you sure?" I heard myself ask, taking the test from her shaking hands. "I took 3 tests. They're all positive." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I have a doctor's appointment scheduled for next week to confirm everything." The guilt crashed over me in waves. 20 minutes ago, I'd been ready to walk out of her life forever. Now she was telling me we were going to be parents, and all I could think about was what a horrible person I was for wanting to leave. "What do you want to do?" I asked, sitting down beside her. "I want to keep it," she said immediately. "I know we're not married yet, but maybe this is the universe telling us we're ready for the next step." She looked at me with those tear-filled eyes. "I love you so much. I want this baby to have both its parents." The next hour was a blur of tears, hugs, and tentative planning. Sarah talked about telling our families, about moving the wedding up, about how much our lives were going to change. She was scared, but excited, and her enthusiasm was infectious. By the time we went to bed that night, I'd completely forgotten about the conversation I'd planned to have. Instead, we were talking about baby names and whether we'd need a bigger apartment. Sarah fell asleep curled against my chest, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. I stared at the ceiling for hours, trying to process how dramatically my life had just changed course. I was going to be a father. The woman I'd been ready to leave was now the mother of my child. Everything I thought I wanted: freedom, a fresh start, the chance to figure out who I was outside of this relationship, was gone. But as I lay there in the dark, listening to Sarah's steady breathing, I told myself this was better. This was what being an adult meant, putting someone else's needs before your own. I just had no idea how right I was about that last part. The next 3 months were like living in an elaborate theater production when, here I was the only one who didn't know I was acting in a play. Sarah threw herself into pregnancy with an Oscar-worthy performance. She downloaded pregnancy apps, started reading parenting books, and began following pregnancy influencers on Instagram. She complained about morning sickness that seemed to strike at the most convenient times, usually when I was getting ready for work or when we had plans she didn't want to keep. "Oh God, I think I'm going to be sick," she'd say, rushing to the bathroom with her hand over her mouth. I'd hear retching sounds through the door, and when she emerged, she'd be pale and shaky, requiring comfort and maybe a change of plans. She stopped drinking coffee, claiming the smell made her nauseous. She refused sushi when we went out to eat, wrinkling her nose and saying, "The baby doesn't like it." She started taking what she said were prenatal vitamins, though I noticed she always took them when I wasn't looking. The baby shopping started almost immediately. Sarah dragged me to Target and Bye Baby, cooing over tiny onesies and elaborate strollers. She made lists of everything we'd need, researched the best car seats, and started planning the nursery color scheme. "Feel," she'd say, taking my hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. I think I felt a flutter. I'd keep my hand there, waiting to feel some sign of life, but there was nothing. "I don't feel anything," I'd tell her. "It's still early," she'd explain. First-time dads usually can't feel movement until later anyway. Our families were over the moon. My mom immediately started planning a baby shower. Sarah's parents began talking about moving closer to help with the baby. Everyone wanted to know if we'd found out the gender yet, if we'd picked names, when the due date was. Sarah had an answer for everything. She said she wanted to wait until the second trimester to find out the gender. She claimed the due date was still a few weeks away from being confirmed. She had elaborate explanations for why she hadn't been showing yet, why she didn't have many pregnancy symptoms, why everything seemed so normal. But the doctor's appointments were where things got weird. "I prefer to go alone for now," she'd say whenever I offered to come with her. "I get nervous with you there, and I want to be able to ask embarrassing questions without feeling self-conscious." It seemed reasonable at first, but as weeks turned into months, I started to feel left out of my own child's development. Other expectant fathers I knew went to ultrasounds, heard heartbeats, saw their babies on screens. I was getting secondhand reports from Sarah about appointments that always seemed to go perfectly but never produced any photos or paperwork. "The doctor says everything looks great," she'd report after each visit. "Baby's measuring right on track." "Did you get any pictures?" I'd ask. "The machine was broken," or "the baby was in a weird position," or "I forgot to ask." There was always a reason. The pressure to get married intensified daily. Both sets of parents kept asking when we were going to make it official. Sarah started looking at wedding venues that could accommodate a small, intimate ceremony before she started showing. "I want to be married before the baby comes," she'd say, showing me pictures of simple dresses that would work for a pregnant bride. "I want our child to be born into a marriage, not just a relationship." The guilt was crushing. Here was this woman carrying my child, wanting to marry me and build a life together, and all I could think about was how trapped I felt. What kind of person resents their pregnant fiancé for wanting security and commitment? I threw myself into the role of supportive partner. I rubbed her feet when she complained they were swollen. I made late-night runs to get whatever food she was craving. I listened to her talk about nursery themes and birth plans and all the ways our lives were about to change. But late at night, when she was asleep beside me, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder why nothing about this felt right. 3 months into Sarah's pregnancy, the little inconsistencies started adding up to something I couldn't ignore anymore. It started with the periods. I noticed, because I do the laundry in our house, Sarah has this thing about her delicates being washed separately, so I was always handling her underwear, and I kept finding period stains. When I mentioned it to her, she had an explanation ready. "It's spotting," she said without missing a beat. "It's totally normal in early pregnancy. I asked my doctor about it, and she said some women spot throughout their first trimester." I wanted to believe her. I Googled it, and sure enough, spotting during pregnancy was a real thing. But something about her quick, practiced response bothered me. It felt rehearsed. Then there were the prenatal vitamins. Sarah made a big show of taking them every morning, but I realized I'd never actually seen the bottle. She'd disappear into the bathroom with her purse, and I'd hear the sound of pills rattling, but the bottle never appeared on our bathroom counter with the rest of our daily medications. One morning I decided to test something. "Honey, Where do you keep your prenatal vitamins? I want to read about what's in them. She was buttering toast at the kitchen counter, and I saw her shoulders tense slightly. They're in my purse, she said. I keep them there so I don't forget to take them at work. Can I see the bottle? Why? The question came out sharper than necessary, and she immediately softened her tone. I mean, I already took today's dose. I can show you later when I get home from work. She never showed me later. When I asked again, she said she'd forgotten them at the office. The doctor's appointments were another red flag. Sarah claimed to have prenatal appointments every few weeks, but she never came home with any paperwork. No appointment reminders, no ultrasound photos, no pamphlets about pregnancy stages or birth classes. I started paying attention to her schedule. She'd block off time for these appointments, but they never seemed to last very long. A typical prenatal visit, especially early in pregnancy, should take at least an hour with waiting time. Sarah's appointments were always exactly 45 minutes, just long enough to drive somewhere, sit in a coffee shop, and drive back. The biggest red flag was hidden in her car. I was cleaning out her Honda one weekend when I found a small CVS bag wedged under the passenger seat. Inside were 3 pregnancy test boxes, all opened, all empty. 3 months into her pregnancy, why was Sarah still buying pregnancy tests? When I asked her about it, she had another explanation ready. I was paranoid about losing the baby, she said, her eyes filling with tears. I know it's silly, but I kept testing to make sure I was still pregnant. My anxiety has been through the roof. It sounded plausible. Pregnancy anxiety was real. Women worried about miscarriages, especially early in pregnancy. But something about the way she said it felt off. The tears came too quickly, the explanation too detailed. I started watching her more carefully. The morning sickness always seemed to happen at convenient times, when she wanted to get out of social obligations, when I suggested activities she didn't want to do, when conversations turned to topics she wanted to avoid. She never actually threw up when I was around. I'd hear retching sounds from the bathroom, but when she emerged, her makeup was never smudged, her breath never, or smelled sour. She'd be pale and shaky, but in a way that seemed performative rather than genuine. The food aversions were inconsistent too. She'd claim the smell of coffee made her sick, but I'd find empty Starbucks cups in her car. She'd refuse wine at dinner parties, making a show of covering her glass and saying, "Not while I'm pregnant." But I found a wine bottle hidden in our laundry room that was definitely being consumed by someone. By month 3, I had a file of mental evidence that something wasn't right. But who fakes a pregnancy? Who lies about something so serious, so life-changing? The idea seemed so absurd that I kept pushing it down, telling myself I was being paranoid and unsupportive. But that night, when I found the negative pregnancy test in our bathroom, everything clicked into place. All the inconsistencies, all the convenient explanations, all the performances that felt just slightly off. Sarah had been lying to me for 3 months. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I waited 2 days after finding that pregnancy test to confront Sarah. 2 days of watching her maintain her elaborate charade, knowing it was all a lie. 2 days of her rubbing her flat stomach and talking about our baby while I bit my tongue and planned my approach. I decided to give her one more chance to come clean on her own. "Sarah," I said over dinner on Thursday night, "I've been thinking about the baby a lot lately. I'd really like to come to your next doctor's appointment. I feel like I'm missing out on everything." She didn't even look up from her pasta. "I told you I prefer to go alone right now. It's too overwhelming with you there." "But I'm the father. I want to hear the heartbeat, see the ultrasounds. Other dads get to do that." Now she looked at me, and for just a second I saw panic flash across her face. "The next few appointments are just route, fine checkups, nothing exciting. When we get to the fun stuff, I promise you can come." "When will that be?" "Soon." Her voice was getting defensive. "Why are you pushing this all of a sudden?" This was my moment, because I found something in the bathroom 2 nights ago. The color drained from her face. She set down her fork very carefully, like she was buying herself time to think. "What did you find?" I pulled the negative pregnancy test out of my pocket and placed it on the table between us. Sarah stared at it like it was a bomb that might explode. You want to explain this to me? For a long moment, she said nothing. I watched her face cycle through different emotions: shock, fear, calculation, and then something that looked like resignation. "Where did you find that?" she finally whispered. "In our bathroom, hidden under the towels." I kept my voice steady, but my heart was pounding. "Sarah, are you pregnant or not?" She started crying. Not the delicate tears she usually produced when she wanted sympathy, but ugly, desperate sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. "I can explain," she gasped between sobs. "Then explain." "You were going to leave me." The words came out in a rush. "That night, before I told you about the pregnancy, I could tell you were going to break up with me. I saw it in your eyes, heard it in your voice. You were already halfway out the door." "So you lied about being pregnant?" "I panicked," she screamed, loud enough that our neighbors probably heard. "I love you so much, and I couldn't lose you. Not over some stupid rough patch that every couple goes through." I stared at her across our dining room table, this woman I'd been planning to marry, and felt like I was looking at a complete stranger. "Sarah, you faked a pregnancy for 3 months. You made me believe we were having a baby. You made our families believe it. You planned a wedding based on a lie." "I was protecting us," she insisted, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "I was protecting our relationship. Sometimes you have to fight for what you want. By lying, by doing whatever it takes." Her tears had turned angry now. "You would have thrown away 2 years together over what? Some temporary doubts? Some cold feet? Every relationship has rough patches, but you were ready to just walk away like none of it mattered." The audacity of it was breathtaking. She was sitting there, caught in a massive lie that had derailed both our lives, and somehow I was still the villain in her story. "You can't fake a pregnancy to keep someone, Sarah. That's not how relationships work." "It worked, didn't it?" she shot back. "You stayed. You fell in love with the idea of our future together. You started planning for our baby, for our marriage. You were happy. I was living a lie. You were living the life we were supposed to have." She stood up so abruptly her chair fell backwards. "If you hadn't been so ready to give up on us, I never would have had to do this." That's when I realized she wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was angry that she'd been caught. "Pack your things," I said quietly. "I want you out of here tonight. You can't be serious. Dead serious. This is over, Sarah. All of it." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression, something calculating and cold. "Fine," she said, "but don't think this ends here." I had no idea what she meant by that. I was about to find out. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. It was my mom. "Honey, I just got off the phone with Sarah. She's devastated. What happened? She said you kicked her out over the pregnancy?" I sat up in bed, my stomach dropping. "Mom, what exactly did she tell you?" "She said you've been pressuring her about the pregnancy, asking her to prove it to you, making her feel like you don't trust her. She said when she finally broke down and admitted she was scared about being a mom, you called her a liar and threw her out." "That's not what happened." "She's heartbroken, sweetie. She said she's been trying so hard to be the perfect pregnant fiancée for you, and you've been questioning everything she does. She feels like you don't want the baby." I could hear the disappointment in my mom's voice. Sarah had gotten to her first, spun the story in her favor, and now I was the heartless boyfriend who'd abandoned his pregnant girlfriend. "Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you say anything." But before I could explain, my phone beeped with another call, then another. By 9 a.m., I'd heard from my mom, my dad, my brother, Sarah's mom, and 2 of our mutual friends. Sarah had called everyone in our lives and told them her version of the story. According to Sarah's narrative, I was a controlling, paranoid boyfriend who'd been making her pregnancy miserable with constant demands for proof and accusations. She painted herself as the victim of my emotional abuse, a scared young woman trying to navigate her first pregnancy while dealing with an unsupportive partner. She told people I'd been tracking her doctor's appointments, demanding to see medical records, and accusing her of lying about being pregnant. When she finally broke down under the pressure and admitted she was terrified about becoming a mother, I'd used her vulnerable moment against her and kicked her out. The worst part? Her version wasn't entirely untrue. I had been questioning her doctor's appointments. I had been asking to see evidence of the pregnancy. I had kicked her out. Without the context of the actual lie, I looked like the monster she was painting me as. My brother Jake was the most direct about it. Dude, what the hell is wrong with you? Sarah's pregnant with your kid and you threw her out because she admitted she's scared? That's messed up, even for you. Jake, she's not Nant. She faked the whole thing. Come on, man, that's a serious accusation. Are you sure you're not just freaking out about becoming a dad and looking for reasons to run? That stung because part of me wondered if he was right. Was I so desperate to get out of this relationship that I'd convinced myself Sarah was lying? The doubt was eating me alive. Sarah's social media campaign was masterful. She posted subtle messages about going through a difficult time and learning who your real friends are. She shared articles about pregnancy anxiety and the importance of supportive partners. She never mentioned me by name, but everyone knew what she was talking about. The comments on her posts made me sick to my stomach. You deserve so much better, hun. Stay strong. Some men just can't handle the responsibility of fatherhood. Praying for you and the baby during this difficult time. Friends who'd known me for years were looking at me like I'd grown a second head. Co-workers were giving me the cold shoulder. My own family was questioning my character and my version of events. Sarah had played this perfectly. She'd positioned herself as the victim and me as the villain, and she'd done it so quickly and thoroughly that I didn't have time to defend myself before the narrative was set in stone. 2 weeks after our confrontation, I was completely isolated. The woman who'd spent 2 years systematically cutting me off from my support system had now turned that same support system against me. But Sarah had made one crucial mistake in her manipulation campaign. She'd underestimated my determination to prove the truth. I realized I needed evidence. Real, undeniable proof that Sarah had been lying about the pregnancy. Her word against mine wasn't going to be enough to convince anyone, especially when she'd already painted me as the untrustworthy one in this story. I started by documenting everything I could remember. I wrote down dates, conversations, inconsistencies I'd noticed. I made a timeline of her supposed pregnancy and cross-referenced it with things I could verify, like the period stains I'd found doing laundry, the empty wine bottle in our laundry room, the pregnancy test boxes in her car. Then I remembered something crucial. Sarah had been living with me for over a year. We shared everything: Netflix accounts, Amazon Prime, even some credit cards. If she'd been buying pregnancy tests regularly, there would be a digital paper trail. I logged into our shared Amazon account and searched the order history. There it was, 3 separate orders for pregnancy tests over the past 3 months, all delivered to her work address, not our home, all ordered on dates when she'd had doctor's appointments. But the real smoking gun was in our shared Google Photos account. Sarah had been taking pictures throughout her supposed pregnancy, photos of her bump from different angles, selfies with her hand on her stomach, pictures of baby clothes she'd bought. But when I looked at the metadata on these photos, something didn't add up. The bump photos were all taken on the same day, just from different angles and with different outfits. She'd been creating a fake pregnancy progression by stuffing pillows under her shirts and photographing herself multiple times in one session. I screenshot everything. The Amazon orders, the photo metadata, the timeline inconsistencies. I even went back to CVS and asked if I could see the security footage from the days she'd claimed to have doctor's appointments. The manager couldn't show me the footage, but she confirmed that Sarah had been in the store multiple times buying pregnancy tests, not exactly the behavior of someone who was confidently pregnant. The hardest evidence to get was medical PA's roof, but Sarah had made a mistake there too. She'd mentioned her doctor's name several times, Dr. Martinez at Women's Health Associates. When I called the office and explained I was her fiancé trying to coordinate insurance for our baby, they had no record of Sarah ever being a patient there. No appointments, no ultrasounds, no pregnancy. Armed with this evidence, I started reaching out to the people who mattered most. I began with my brother Jake, showing him the Amazon order history and the photo metadata. "Holy shit," he said, staring at my laptop screen. "She really faked all of this? Every single bit of it." Jake was the first person to apologize. "Man, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. This is insane. Who does this?" Slowly, methodically, I presented my case to family and close friends. The evidence was overwhelming when laid out systematically. The Amazon orders for pregnancy tests, the metadata showing the fake bump progression photos, the doctor's office having no record of her as a patient. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Sarah's roommate from college, Jessica, reached out to me after hearing about our breakup through mutual friends. What she told me changed everything. "I hate to be the one to tell you this," Jessica said over coffee, "but Sarah did this before. In college, she faked a pregnancy to keep her boyfriend from transferring schools. She's done this exact same thing before." Jessica had receipts, old text messages from college where Sarah had confided her plan, photos of the fake bump progression she'd done back then, even the name of the boyfriend who'd fallen for it the first time. Sarah wasn't just a liar, she was a serial manipulator who used fake pregnancies as a tool to control the men in her life. With Jessica's testimony and all my documented evidence, the tide began to turn. People started reaching out, to apologize, to express shock and disbelief at what Sarah had done. The same friends who'd been giving me the cold shoulder were now asking how they could support me. My family was horrified. My mom cried when I showed her the evidence, apologizing over and over for doubting me. My dad was furious, not at me, but at Sarah for manipulating all of us so completely. But Sarah wasn't done fighting. When she realized her web of lies was unraveling, she made one last desperate play to maintain control. And it almost worked. Sarah's final gambit was as manipulative as everything else she'd done, but this time it backfired spectacularly. When she realized that people were starting to believe my side of the story, she called my mom directly and made a claim that stopped me cold. She said she'd actually had a miscarriage the day after our fight, brought on by the stress of our confrontation. "She's devastated," my mom told me over the phone. "She said the stress of you not believing her caused her to lose the baby. She's asking for space to grieve, but she wanted you to know what your accusations cost her." For about 12 hours, I was consumed with guilt. What if Sarah really had been pregnant and lost the baby because of our fight? What if I'd been wrong about everything? But then I remembered the negative pregnancy test I'd found, the test that was dated 2 days after our confrontation, the test that proved she wasn't pregnant even after she claimed to have miscarried. Sarah had made a critical error. In her desperation to maintain sympathy and control the narrative, she'd claimed a miscarriage that the timeline proved was impossible. I showed my mom the test with the date stamp. I walked her through the timeline step by step. The fake pregnancy, the negative test, then the claimed miscarriage that would have happened after the test proved she was never pregnant in the first place. That's when my mom got angry, really angry. "She's been lying to all of us this entire time," Mom said, her voice shaking with rage. "She made me feel guilt for doubting her. She made me question my own son's character. And now she's lying about losing a baby that never existed in the first place?" My mom called Sarah's mother directly and laid out all the evidence. Sarah's own family was horrified when they realized the extent of her deception. Her dad called me to apologize and to assure me that they would be having a serious conversation with their daughter about getting professional help. The fake miscarriage claim was the final straw for everyone who'd been on Sarah's side. It was so callous, so manipulative, that even people who'd been willing to give her the benefit of the doubt were done with her. Sarah tried to backtrack, claiming she'd been confused about dates due to emotional trauma, but nobody was buying it anymore. Her credibility was completely shot. I consulted with a lawyer about whether Sarah's actions constituted fraud or harassment, but ultimately decided not to pursue legal action. I just wanted her out of my life permanently. The lawyer did help me document everything in case Sarah tried to escalate things further, and he assured me that I had grounds for a restraining order if necessary. Sarah's final social media posts were desperate attempts to maintain some shred of sympathy, but the comments sections had turned against her. People who'd supported her initially were expressing shock and disgust at the extent of her manipulation. Within a month, Sarah had moved back to her hometown. Mutual friends told me she'd been fired from her job. Apparently, word of her fake pregnancy had gotten around the office, and her employer wasn't comfortable with someone who demonstrated such a capacity for deception. The strangest part of the whole aftermath was the relief I felt. For 3 months, I'd been planning a life I didn't want with a person who didn't really exist. I'd been guilt-tripping myself for not being excited about a baby that wasn't real, for not wanting to marry someone who'd built our entire relationship on manipulation and control. Now I was free, actually free for the first time in 2 years. My friends and family were incredibly supportive once they understood what had really happened. My brother Jake helped me change the locks on my apartment and made sure I had good security cameras installed, just in case Sarah decided to escalate things. But she didn't. Sarah seemed to understand that she'd played her hand and lost completely. The last I heard, she was in therapy and had moved in with her parents while she figured out her next steps. I hoped she'd get the help she needed, but mostly I was just grateful to have my life back. 6 months later, I can honestly say that discovering Sarah's lie was the best thing that ever happened to me. I know that sounds crazy. Nobody wants to find out their entire relationship was built on deception and manipulation. Nobody wants to realize they've been living a lie for months. But Sarah's fake pregnancy was the wake-up call I needed to understand what a healthy relationship actually looks like. The biggest lesson I learned was to trust my instincts. For 2 years, I'd ignored red flags, dismissed my own discomfort, and convinced myself that my feelings were wrong. I'd let Sarah gaslight me into believing that her controlling behavior was love, that her isolation tactics were protection, that my desire for independence was selfishness. I learned that love doesn't require you to lose yourself. A healthy partner doesn't need to cut you off from your friends and family to keep you close. Someone who truly loves you doesn't lie about life-changing events to manipulate you into staying. The experience also taught me about the importance of community. When Sarah turned everyone against me, I realized how isolated she'd made me over the years. But when the truth came out, I also discovered who my real support system was. My family, my true friends. They all came through for me when I needed them most. I'm in a new relationship now with someone named Emma, and the difference is night and day. Emma encourages me to spend time with my friends. She gets along great with my family. She's honest about her feelings, even when they're complicated or inconvenient. When she says something, I believe her because she's never given me a reason not to. Emma knows the whole story about Sarah, and she's been incredibly patient with my trust issues. She understands why I need transparency, why I ask questions, why I sometimes need reassurance that what we have is real. I want you to feel secure with me, she told me early in our relationship. If you need to see my doctor's appointments on my calendar or know where I am, that's fine. I have nothing to hide, and I want you to feel safe. That's what love actually looks like: understanding, patience, and genuine care for your partner's emotional well-being. I've also learned to recognize manipulation tactics that I completely missed with Sarah. The love bombing at the beginning of relationships, the gradual isolation from support systems, the way manipulators make you question your own perceptions and memories. I've educated myself about these patterns so I'll never fall for them again. To anyone watching this who sees themselves in my story, whether you're being manipulated like I was or you're recognizing manipulative patterns in your own behavior, please get help. For victims, reach out to trusted friends, family, or professionals who can help you see the situation clearly. For manipulators, therapy can help you understand why you feel the need to control others and develop healthier relationship skills. Sarah's fake pregnancy could have ruined my life. I could have married her, had real children with her, and spent decades trapped in a relationship built on lies and control. Instead, her deception set me free to find something genuine and healthy. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Sarah taught me what I don't want in a partner, which helped me recognize what I do want when I found it. I'm grateful for that lesson, even if I wouldn't wish the experience on anyone else. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. If you've been through something similar, please share your experience in the comments. Sometimes, just knowing we're not alone in these crazy situations can make all the difference. And remember, trust your instincts. They're usually trying to tell you something important.